Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Astrology Victoria. Today, with your host Tatiana, and also broadcasting for ANN Archetypal News Network. And we're going to talk about this week's astrology, November 7th, Monday, all the way through November 12th, Sunday. And this week, we have the lunar eclipse in Taurus. And this is la pièce de résistance of of this week and of course of this coming period. This eclipse season has been it's pretty intense and wonderful at the same time. So we're gonna dive deep into this eclipse and what it means for us, for you, for the planet, for everybody, and what we can do about it to make it an awesome evolutionary step. So I'm going to share my screen. And on that note of sharing screen, I noticed that last week, unfortunately, for some strange technological reason, all those images I was showing on the chart did not show up in my video, and I was very devastated. So I made sure that today it works. So please feel free also to let me know in the comments what you think about my presentations, if you think there's a format that you like better. I mean, I'm really open to all your comments because I just want to cater to you, the audience, as best as I can so you understand astrology and you understand, not only learn a little bit about it, but also have practical tools to deal with the daily life in the best way possible. That's why it's the astro weather. Okay, so this week, like I said, on November 8th, we're going to have the full moon lunar eclipse at 16 degrees of Taurus, and that is on Tuesday. And we have this is a big climate, a charged eclipse with a lot of tension so that there can be a release. And there is also so beautiful supportive aspects to this eclipse. So we can move forward. Let's look at it in detail. Why is it not moving? Now it's moving. So you see the difference between the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse is that in the solar eclipse, the moon is in between the earth and the sun, and that's why we don't see the sun. And this represents that the sun, which is our capacity to be conscious, gets like eclipsed. It or any planet touching the sun will be almost like turned off. So we are brought to the other side of the eclipse, of its polarity. When the eclipse is a lunar eclipse, what happens is that the earth, it's in between the sun and the moon. And eclipses are full moons and new moons that are close to the lunar node. So we discussed this in the previous video where I talked about it. And this is what makes it an eclipse. And the idea is that eclipses are evolutionary points that keep pushing us forward. That is why they're close to the nodes: the head of the dragon, the north node, and the tail of the dragon, the south node. And it's this constant movement forward of evolution. So when the moon is eclipsed, because the moon doesn't have its own light, basically there's no light to give it power. And the moon represents the emotions, the emotional nature, what drives us emotionally. So it could be inferred that when the moon is eclipsed, almost its function, if its emotional function is like turned down, and we're able to see almost more, it could be like in a more grounded way, things, reality, less with the filter of our emotions and more with a level-headed. And this is interesting in this particular eclipse because of this combo here: Mercury, the sun, and Venus all together in Scorpio, being a bunch of this eclipse. So this little stellium here, they all come together for this eclipse. and they're going to have much more power as this side gets eclipsed, even though what it's wanting to happen is that this side of the equation, which is the Taurus, gets pushed forward by really seeing what's going on here. And that process that began in the first eclipse on October 25th, of starting to see the things that are no longer serving, the relationships, the things that are dying, and in the Scorpio realm of things, and in particular, now that Venus is here and the Sun and Mercury, it's like relationships and value. That is the main topic of this whole eclipse season on Taurus and Scorpio. And that comes together with the relationships we value and what has already ran its course, and the new things we are creating with Uranus plowing ahead. Now, this eclipse in particular has a big component, that this is a T-square to Saturn. You see, Saturn is really in between the old world, which is the South Node Scorpio, and all the ways we used to share, and the attachment we have to certain values, people, and systems, here with Saturn. And now this is the new world trying to be formed in new ways of relating to the earth and to value and to the body. We're talking also about Taurus. And this eclipse includes this Uranus right on top of it. So whenever the planet Uranus is involved in anything, we can expect a big surprise, uh something, a lightning bolt, something that happens, so that we make those changes that are imminent. They're just imminent. It's not like we can go, yeah, whatever. This is also the last pass of this T-square that's been going on and off and on and off. This is it. This is the last one. Once Uranus starts moving forward and starts leaving the square and starts separating from Saturn more and more, and Saturn moves more, and then they start separating, and eventually they're no longer together. We're going to start feeling the actual changes. We're going to start seeing the actual changes of this whole period of time that's been going on for a couple of years. Now we're going to start seeing why all these changes needed to happen and where we're heading to, and these new structures building, these new societal structures. The issue here is that with Saturn, there's still such a desire to keep the old ways of doing things and our old values. It's just so strong, and it's difficult because we don't want to let go. And that is the scorpionic process of release, the pooping process. You need, after the digestion, it's gone. You need to let it out of the system or it will rot and putrefy the system. You don't want that. Okay, as we're moving into these new systems of value. Now, what's very important is that Venus is the ruler of the eclipse. So Venus is at the center of, it's like a centerpiece, not only because it is within the realm of Mercury and the Sun, but it's also because it's the ruler of Taurus. So we are really questioning really deeply our values, and this is it. I talked about this last time, and sometimes the only way to question them is to lose them, to lose something that we deemed previously valuable. That is one way of questioning it. Another way of questioning it is, in this particular case, as Saturn and Venus are also in this square, is when relationships cool off and it seems like there's no love, that there's a distance, that there's some kind of distance, a gap. And that only makes us realize what we truly value, and not only outside of ourselves, but most of all inside of ourselves. And this is those big questions that are going to be asked again and again what are your personal values, not everybody else's, not the distractions of the outside world, not what someone deems to be right and good for you, but what you truly value for yourself and in yourself. And the big question is always, how much do you love yourself and do you value yourself? When we have these squares to Saturn, that seems to be always the question. There comes always with Saturn a call to step up to a certain level of maturity. So this maturity can be in your relationships. Sometimes also it asks for commitment. Sometimes it's about a commitment or a harder look at the reality of our relationships. That's kind of the function of Saturn. It's like, look at it. If it's really not working, if it's dysfunctional, if it's bad, if it's toxic, this is the hard reality. Look at it beyond even the emotion, beyond even the, but I can't leave this, or I can't detach myself from this. And this can be in the form of a person, a relationship, obviously, money, objects, jobs, or even patterns that we are so attached to that we do not want to change, especially with fixed energy, Scorpio, Taurus, and Aquarius. This is like, we're not budging, and this locks everything in place, and Uranus is going to keep saying, well, then maybe we're just going to have to sever it. And Uranus in evolutionary astrology is also associated with trauma in a certain way, because it severs and takes, like, it's so sudden that it's like shock, but it's also there for liberation. That is the whole point of Uranus in the psyche, the collective psyche. It's liberation from something that otherwise we would just be too comfortable being in forever and ever and ever. And especially it's hard in Taurus, because Taurus just wants things slow, steady. I don't want to budge. It's the way it is. It's great like that. And Uranus has been saying since 2018 when it entered Taurus, well, our systems of value need to budge. And if the Taurus is there, like still like not moving, well, we're going to give it a kick until it just moves. And that can look in many different ways. This is why getting upset at material losses at this time is not conducive to any like positive outcomes, because it only creates more anxiety and fear. So the invitation is, whether there are material losses, which is a lot around along this axis, it's like, why am I needing to detach from this materialistic way of seeing things? What is the greater gain? What is the greater gain? And this eclipse is going to be just really highlighting that. So Mercury, Venus, and the sun archetypally point towards friendliness and artistic expression and a capacity to have a beautiful way of saying things and expressing, beauty in expression. It's about expressing. It's the ultimate beautiful way of expressing something. It's artistic, it's poetic, it's big, and it's friendly. It's about friends and all kinds of connections that are positive. Now, the Scorpio component of it makes it for a deep, deep, deep expression. So this is almost the expression or the exposition, the exposing of deep, dark issues, and then a love for it. As a Venus in Scorpio, and I don't know if you saw one of my videos where I talked about my early artworks, and I can, if you want to see my artwork, please feel free to click on my website below, tatianahassan.com. And in my early years, and I mean, I didn't even know I was a Venus in Scorpio. I was just fascinated by death, and all my paintings had some kind of dark theme of death, all of them, even though they were very colorful. I have a natal Uranus Venus too, so there's this kind of disruptive and different and quirky way of making art. And I'm just talking about myself here, but because I understand the archetype very well. And so this is a time where exposing the dark, deeper things of Scorpio can come about. And this is the shadow of humanity. And I was explaining the other day, this is the compost. And literally, I was, okay, I'm going to get gross here. Well, maybe not so much, but I was turning the compost pile the other day and you could see everything rotting, but in the middle, there was this beautiful soil. And I'm like, wow, it's kind of rotting on this side. And I mean, not rotting, but yeah, decomposing. It's gross and it smells. But in the center, there's this soil coming up already. And I have one of the biggest changes I did also this year to be more in tune with the earth and processes, being more connected to the earth was also to get a composting toilet. And I wish everybody would get it if I can do it. Me, who I am just an artist, I've been living in the city, and I moved to a beautiful farm and I have a composting toilet and I could do it. And I'm learning the process of the Scorpio Taurus, the food and then the waste and how the waste becomes nourishment for food again. It's just amazing. So dealing literally with the poop and the waste, it's part of life. And this is the invitation that I think this axis has been like, Uranus and Taurus has been pushing us as a humanity to get more in touch with what is essential to life. Hence, everything that is non-essential might go down the drain. And we do see it in, like, even like I was talking to my mom the other day and she says, wow, the inflation in Colombia is so massive. We cannot even go to restaurants anymore, like, because it's so expensive. And my mom lives in a farm. And I told her, well, you have all these beautiful vegetables. And she says, well, yeah, it's true. For me, I'm just cooking my food and going to the garden and getting the food for cooking the meal. And it's even a better, more nourishing meal. And my mom was literally saying, I'm not even going to restaurants anymore because it's hard to afford a meal outside in a fancy restaurant. So these are things to consider about why our values are changing as a society and with respect to our resources and our earth. Why? Big questions. And how we can also express those values by looking at them deeply. Mercury, that deep penetrative look inside myself, my values, and the things that are being released. Being honest with it and loving the process. That's part of that Venus archetype, the love of the process. So, for example, and this is one of the images I showed last week that you couldn't see. It's this image. This is kind of the way a Saturn Venus could feel like. And because Venus is in that combo with Mercury and the Sun, there is maybe relationships now are having their last, like, come on, look at it. Please, what is the reality of this particular relationship or your values or that pattern? Look at it, and sometimes it's by the loss of it or the cooling down of it. So you see, this is a couple, this is a typical Saturn Venus dynamic. There could be a little bit of a sadness or a distance. However, Saturn Venus, when in good aspects, can be extremely good for committing to something that will stand the test of time. Now we're seeing that we're deconstructing things that are no longer good to keep evolving. Or so sometimes it's presented as this, it's done. This is this gap, this distance, this almost sadness. And with this sadness, there comes a grief as well. And this is part of the scorpionic element, the grieving process. And grieving needs space to exist. So even if anything happens in your daily life that you feel this grief could come up around a relationship, give it that space and understand the reality. Look at it with the reality of what it is so you can more easily let it go. In the same manner, this is the relationship also to ourselves, because this could be somebody in relationship with somebody else. And every relationship we have is a mirror of ourselves in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes relationships are showing us something we are not seeing about ourselves, maybe what we are not loving about ourselves. So in this image, and I talked about this last time, but this is why I wanted to say it again, there's this perception that maybe we don't love ourselves enough, or that we're not valuing what we are inside of us. And then we're seeking the validation outside by all these things we buy, by the accumulation of wealth and stuff, the Taurus desire, the Venus and Taurus desire of accumulating, or wanting to have more and more and more. So when Saturn comes in the mix, there is this reality check. And then we can go back and say, what do I truly value and what do I love in myself? What are my gifts? How do I contribute to the world, to society with my gifts, not what society is telling me I should be, because I'm trying to feel validated by the outside. So this is a good hard look. So my suggestion would be this week to sit with your little journal and write down, and it could be a poem. Let yourself be inspired by a drawing, a poem, or you don't even need to be a great artist. You just can do a doodle of something that in your being wants to be recognized and seen by yourself. How do you recognize yourself as the most amazing being? What awesome things you have to offer? Take a hard look in the mirror and go, instead of all that is wrong with you, go with all that is amazing with you, and all the good things that you have to offer. All the awesome things you have to offer. So this is, oh gosh, sorry, this a little interruption. Radios. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, at your awesomeness. And this will be promoted, this awesomeness or this feeling of spiritual advancement will be promoted by these trines that are coming out after the eclipse. Once we might go deep into this deeper, darker places. This week, there's like this, it's coming out the other side with a lot of insight. The Jupiter-Neptune starting to conjunct can give us a huge amount of expansion of consciousness, of awareness. This is like almost like an openness to something fantastic, to a dreamlike world. And this is where art becomes huge and you can be so inspired. This is the quintessential inspiration aspects, which is the Venus, Mercury, Sun in the trine with Jupiter and Neptune. This is quintessential inspiration, and inspiration comes from in spiritu, so being in spirit. So the invitation here is to surrender to spirit. Jupiter has moved back into Pisces, also to show us that surrender to the waters, the immense waters of the flow. And guess what? Floods everywhere. Oh my God, there's been floods. My mom sent me just these pictures of Colombia flooded, all the streets. Like, it brings water to wash away things, to make us also more aware of the flow of life and the trust in something bigger. It's the divine. So when we surrender, and I guess these eclipses are going to be of extreme surrender, if we can surrender to those currents of life and to that call from spirit, this could be magnificent times of inspiration beyond the difficulty, beyond the death, beyond all of that, especially because Pluto is also in a quincunx to Mars, and we have not talked much about Mars, but Mars has been going in this square to Uranus, to Neptune for a while, and we've talked about this and these distractions, and then having to make sure that you're going on the right path. We could be distracted. We could be also part of the square is to maybe give into fantasies as well, especially with Jupiter in the mix. There could be, this desire for something fantastic, magical, almost escapism, right? There could be escapist tendencies with this, where we would want a different reality, that there's something different and we're not seeing, you know, the actual, how you create that reality. This is why Saturn is active here, because there is a reality check to every desire to escape. And escaping is not a bad thing. This is the quintessential daydreaming aspect. And when we can express it, then there is an access, a portal of access to literally other dimensions and possibilities. And as we awaken in consciousness, we can realize that that what are we fighting for? And this is Mars's question. Where are we going? Where is our fight? What are we doing? And this can be confusing for this Mars squaring Neptune. Like, there could be a lot of confusion and maybe delusion, and going for something that's not even real. So here, the trine to this um Venus and the stellium trining Jupiter Neptune wants us to have the faith to dream. And this is part of Jupiter. Jupiter is faith and hope. So this is an extremely hopeful aspect, that anything that could be going wrong in our lives is just opening a bigger window to immense awakening and growth. And this is what I would say this image is about. This is how I interpreted that trine of the stellium, where yes, there is maybe a dark side to things, and then there is this possibility that there is immense love in spirit and hope. And there's like this heart in here, and it's a golden heart. So what is the golden heart in this image? Is the capacity to connect to something so bright, so precious. And that gold, the value that we have, is not outside ourselves. It's not in a gold coin. It's not in a thing we buy. It's not in something we can get from the outside world. It's in our own golden heart. That's what that is the message, the intrinsic message of this time. That's it. And if we align with this message and with our heart's desire to be in love, not to seek love outside, but to be in love, that's a very different perspective. And it's a very different spiritual way of seeing life. Because when we are in love, bathed in it, like these rose petals coming, it's like a soothing balm from something that's much greater than our little ego. Our little ego. And that's illustrated by that quincunx of Mars and uh and Pluto, I would say, in a way that we just want to force through something, that we can get things through force, or through domination, or through, or cruelty, or like whatever means necessary in order to not be in pain. And and that is like, is that really the way we want to go? How do we adjust these deep fears and changes and collapses to a new way of existing that also can be more fun, more loving? And that's part of that. Mars in Gemini could be just also seeking, it's a Mercury ruled Mars, which is about also seeking something more light, more playful. So in a certain sense, I would go back to, being like a child is having that innocence to look again at what play means. When we play, we create, and when we create, we flow. And life can be playing. It's a play, it's the great play, right? And if we don't take it that seriously, then we can evolve. And that doesn't mean we don't look at the darker parts, but hey, it's like me playing with the compost. I know this is a weird way to say things, but can we integrate that Scorpio Taurus axis of the natural cycles of death and rebirth into our daily lives as something normal, like dealing with compost or with feces or or with the shadow of oneself and one's nature? And that be give it a voice. That's why Mercury is there with Venus and with the sun, to give it a voice. When the demons have a voice, guess what? They're no longer demons. They become accepted. And once they're accepted, they can be transmuted into light, into love. And that's kind of part of what this whole theme of this past weeks is about. This is why these weeks, this is the time to do this. And I always wonder, well, what happens if I don't do any of it? We don't evolve, we stay attached, we keep like stubbornly not letting go of the past. Well, unfortunately, sometimes with evolution, what happens is like something happens in your life that then gives you no choice but to actually evolve. And you'll evolve either by being dragged or by walking willingly with evolution. And this is, I feel, the biggest message of these times. So, to conclude and not get distracted with life and social media and everything and everybody's opinions and everything, and what are we looking for? Always look within. That's it. That's the only way to look. It's within your truth, within your values, and see if they have changed, because I bet your values have drastically changed from the last cycle. When we had even when you look like a few years back, let's just look like in the last time we had these eclipses in Uranus and in Taurus and Scorpio. Usually, the nodes change they return to their original position around every 18 years. And so it's just looking back at what's been going on in the last 18 and 9 years. Like, how were you? What were your values back then? What were your values now? How have you evolved throughout these past 18 years? This is kind of like the question I have for you. It's like, how have you been evolving in your values? And see the miracle of our evolutionary process, that it's a spiral. So with this being said, I'm going to leave you here to reflect. And this is part of these eclipses, is reflection time, especially with the moon. I invite you this Tuesday to sit in reflection about all these topics. What do you value? What are you needing to let go of? Are you attached to certain things that, you could actually let them go? And be very honest, like brutally honest with yourself and with your loved ones, or with anybody that you're needing to be very honest with, and make decisions based on that are mature. And that's why Saturn is there, that are realistic, and that ultimately will be for your betterment and the betterment of society. Because if you evolve, society evolves. Okay, This is my message for today. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to share, subscribe, like, tap the little bell for notifications. This really helps more people find this information and hopefully get inspired. Um, so yes, and if you want to click on the links below, you can see all the other offerings I have. You can look at my website for the artwork I do, also the music I create, and all of these wonderful things that might accompany in your journey, because this is why I do what I do. I am not just an astrologer. I was blessed with the gifts of being also an artist and a musician, and all of these gifts I hope you can enjoy as well. So feel free to click on all those links below and explore and be part of this journey, of my journey. I am part of yours, and I'm really grateful for you being here. Also, please leave me comments about what you think about the videos, or if something struck you, and how have you been evolving as well, or anything that could keep this community also growing and engaging. So thank you very much. I love you all, and I'll see you next week.